hear Walz brag about how much of a man he is. What does that tell you?
I think there might be a little bit of a cope there, you could say. There's a little bit, he has to
Viewer discretion, seriously. This is commentary, not litigation, and we're here to analyze, roast, and make sense of a political spectacle that plenty of people are already arguing about at full volume. The public's take right now? Charlie Kirk just took a sledgehammer to Tim Walz's carefully staged regular guy persona, and the
BBQ. Trying to not even be able to load a shotgun or fix a truck. I'll tell you one thing, the most masculine thing that someone can do in America today is stand up for women that are not able to stand up for themselves.
Right.
So while Tim Walz is going on Gavin Newsom's podcast, attacking me, by the way, saying that I'm a bad guy, well, I'm sorry, Governor Walz. One thing that we don't have in common is, unlike you in Minnesota, I, every single day, am actually fighting for female privacy in locker rooms and that women's sports will not have men in them. Real men stand up for women when their
chips are still falling. That's the temperature on the timeline. And the core news right up front. Kirk went after the Minnesota governor on everything from masculinity and women's sports to taxes, schools, crime, and a controversial military retirement storyline, then dared the coach-turned-politician to throw a football as a symbol of the larger image versus results gap. If you clicked in to see whether that gap is real or
who are the enemy of the American people, are refusing to cover the details of how egregious this is. This here is one of the most disgusting, repulsive, and reprehensible examples of abandoning one's unit, of turning back on country and instead for own personal comfort and safety that we have ever seen in politics. And it's far worse than I even think people are describing it. It is worse than stolen valor. It is abandoning your fellow soldier.
Just theater. You're in the exact right place. The public sentiment is that Walz sells authenticity like it's a flannel shirt at the checkout counter. The contrarian twist we're digging into is that the ordinary Midwestern dad costume might be the most curated brand in the room. Quick proof sample before we go deeper. Critics point to his 2005 retirement from the National Guard after a deployment warning order, the subsequent adjustment of his
4 years in the Minnesota Army National Guard, retiring at the rank of Master Sergeant as an E8 in the Army. In the spring of 2005, Walz was serving as the Command Sergeant Major of the 1st Battalion, 125th Field Artillery, a Minnesota Army National Guard battalion that is part of the 34th Infantry Division. Also in spring of 2005, Walz and his battalion received a warning order that their battalion would be deploying to Iraq. We know this because Walz's own congressional campaign told us at the time. See the link below from the
retirement rank from E9 to E8, and his state's rising costs and frayed classroom outcomes under his watch, all of which Kirk stitched into one long takedown. Here's the roadmap for what you're about to get. First, we unpack the money, taxes, outmigration, and the price of simply existing in Minnesota. Then we hit the heaviest punch, the guard story that Kirk treats like Exhibit A in the case.
You know, I've seen Charlie throw a football. You have an arm. And Coach Walz, he talks about how much he loves football. I've never seen him throw a football. Isn't that strange? If you were a big football coach and you're out on the campaign trail, maybe just throw it once. John Edwards, John Kerry used to throw it on the tarmac. He never threw the ball once.
I think it would be very similar to Barack Obama throwing a baseball. I don't think it would be a sight that would be easy on the eyes. That's right, I could throw quite a tight spiral. Hey, Governor Walz, let's go have a game of catch. We'll see how you do.
You know,
Coach.
Charlie's doing podcasts with Newsom. Why don't you go throw the pigskin with Walz? What do you say?
I think it's a great idea. I'll fly on up to Minneapolis. We'll see what it's all about, Governor Walz. You're Mr. Coach. You're the one that can motivate the troops. Do you even know how to throw a football? Let's let the
for credibility. After that, we trace schools, crime, and the national stage ambitions that hover over it all. Along the way, we'll circle back to that football challenge, the real men protect women through line, and the bigger expectation versus reality lens. That makes the whole thing snap into focus. Buckle up, because every 30 seconds or so, I'm going to open a loop, slam a pattern interrupt, or drop a callback. So if you step away, You'll
Kirk on Fox. I couldn't believe it. I'm telling you guys, as soon as I seen that this video was posted, I opened it up because God bless Charlie for everything that he's been doing, you know, with helping President Trump, going out there speaking to people. He has done a lot of work. Like, I watched some of Charlie Kirk's videos and he is out there speaking to the people, letting them know what President Trump stands for, and that means a lot to me because
miss the payoff 2 minutes later when the threads tie together and the mask slips. Start with dollars because bills don't care about branding. Picture a young family in Rochester loading groceries into the trunk at dusk, counting receipts by the glow of the dashboard, trading off which subscription to cancel this month so the car insurance clears. Kirk's argument is that under Walz, the state feels like a stress test. Taxes escalated, regulation piled up, and that quiet...
Walz, nevertheless, chose to retire from the National Guard in May of 2005 to pursue his congressional campaign. Serving members of the National Guard and the reserves routinely also serve in Congress and always have. Tulsi Gabbard is an excellent recent example. Walz did not necessarily need to retire to run for Congress. However, in Iraq deployment, he might have chosen instead to participate and would, in fact, have prevented...
Middle-class Minnesota, once marketed in glossy brochures, now looks at neighboring states like their emergency exits. Application right now. Small business owners, especially the ones with 5 employees and a lease they signed in 2019, feel like they're playing economic Jenga. One more compliance brick and the tower wobbles. Framing. People were promised affordability, stability, Midwestern normalcy. What they feel is a creeping expense to simply sit still. Expectation versus reality. Round 1. And before we leave the parking lot, a mini hook. Follow that family home and listen for the conversation at the kitchen table, because when parents start asking why the math homework is a struggle while the school board debates the next fashionable initiative, they don't just look at curriculum, they look at the governor's office. Keep that thought. We're coming back. Now the strongest blow, the one Kirk treats like a credibility Rorschach test. The guard story. The scene opens in spring 2005. A warning order goes out for the battalion. The deployment to Iraq looms. The weather still has that upper Midwest chill. Uniforms hang on doors. Families talk in half sentences because certain words make it too real. Critics say that around then Walz retires to pursue a congressional run. Later, the Army reflects an official retirement rank of E8 after he had been selected for the Sergeant's Major Academy. Details that veterans seize on as the difference between a story you tell at rallies and a story you have to answer for. Application. For people who wear the uniform or love someone who did, the timeline isn't trivia, it's trust. If your pitch is, I'm the steady hand, the coach who won't leave the field, any ambiguity here becomes a megaphone for your opponents. Framing. A politician can survive disagreements on policy. Credibility fractures are harder to mend. Expectations were that the coach archetype implies shoulder-to-shoulder leadership under pressure. The reality, in the eyes of critics, is a departure before the team boarded the plane. We will not litigate beyond what's on the record here, but understand the rhetorical power. Kirk positions this as the hinge that swings every other door in the argument: economy, education, public safety, because if the biography's core lesson is contested, the policy claims feel downstream of that. Hold that in your pocket as we pivot back to the second best point, money, with sharper focus. Imagine Main Street in a first-ring suburb at noon, an empty storefront that used to smell like espresso and cinnamon, a barber running numbers out loud like prayer, a florist who can quote the new fees from memory. Kirk's framing is merciless. You can't promise working-class relief while the cost of living rises faster than the paychecks that were supposed to be protected. Application. Once people start pricing out U-Hauls, your argument becomes time-stamped. If your neighbors are sending you photos from South Dakota saying, it's not glamorous, but the rent doesn't bite, that message outruns any press conference. Expectation versus reality again. The promise was affordability. The reality is coin jar budgeting for gas and groceries. Pattern interrupt. And yet, we're told the vibe is fine. Minnesota nice with a ledger that looks increasingly mean. Cue the teaser we dropped in the parking lot. That math homework. Parents, here's your scene. Folding chairs in a gym that doubles as a boardroom. Microphones with red lights. The hum of fluorescent bulbs. They came for reading proficiency and long division. They left with buzzword bingo and the creeping suspicion their kid's GPA is being traded for a trend. Kirk's hit here isn't subtle. He paints Walz as an education reformer who forgot the product is literacy, not hashtags. Application. When report cards arrive and skills don't match the slogans, families don't file white papers, they file out. Framing. The expectation is that public school is a launch pad. The reality for too many is remedial everything and rhetoric that treats fundamentals as optional. Mini cliffhanger. In 60 seconds, we're going to link this to crime, and you're going to see why those two charts have the same slope. But first, a sharp aside. Remember the football challenge? It's not really about a spiral. It's about symbolism. If you brand yourself coach, people will eventually ask you to step on the field. If you dodge the throw, voters wonder what else you'll sidestep when the cameras aren't around. Speaking of fields, let's walk a beat through public safety. Night air over Minneapolis. November wind sneaking through gaps in old windows. A dad on the third floor landing checking that second lock because lately the neighborhood group chat reads like a police blotter. Kirk's contention is simple enough to survive the noise. If the basic pact between government and citizen is you keep the streets safe while I keep paying taxes, then the sight of leaders soft-pedaling enforcement while crime ticks up feels like a breach. Application. People adapt in quiet ways. Route changes, earlier curfews, an extra camera over the garage. Little choices that add up to we don't feel secure. Framing. Leaders talk in high-minded abstractions. Households live in concrete routines. Expectation. Order. Reality. Too often. Risk management at the kitchen table. And here's that promised connection. The same ecosystem that lets basics slide in classrooms often tolerates fuzziness in public safety, good intentions elevated above hard outcomes. Pattern interrupt. It's not compassion to ignore consequences. It's a policy lottery with other people's lives as the jackpot. Now thread back through the cultural fight Kirk kept circling, the line about real men stand up for women. He leverages it in two ways. First, as a gut check. If your definition of leadership doesn't include protecting female privacy in locker rooms and fairness in women's sports, he says, then your empathy is abstract. Second, as a branding scalpel. If you position yourself as the man's man coach, but won't pick a lane on issues where women ask for boundaries, the posture reads as costume. Application. For many viewers, this argument isn't academic. It shows up as a daughter's sports team losing opportunities, or a teenage girl asking awkward questions about bathrooms that adults dodge. Framing. Expectation. Leaders safeguard the vulnerable. Reality. In this critique, leaders outsource the discomfort to the families who have to navigate it in real time. Whether you agree with Kirk or not, understand the mechanics. He turns a values fight into a character test and character tests into voting behavior. Let's add media to the mix for a beat, because Kirk does.